and that was it.
He went one day.
He went one day, sat in class for one day, and he wouldn't go back. He hates school. He hates sitting there.
You know, it isn't, the way that we do school isn't for everybody. And I wish there were other avenues of school that fit other personalities, because the way we do school, it seems like there's only one way, there's only one method,
Well,
and if you
now
don't
they have
fit into that,
homeschool, I mean, homeschool.
there are a
they
little
have
bit more, there are,
online school, and there's other options now.
There are
They're
now.
not necessarily all, you know, everything fit everybody, but at least it's more than just.
one thing,
Go ahead.
oh, one thing, my daughter, she's gotten older, she's pretty good about getting ready. My son, he's sometimes drags his feet. I'll say, you know, get your socks and shoes on, and I turn around 2 minutes later, he's done nothing, right? But he's super sensitive, and I have a couple times, if I raise my voice just a little bit, he's sad, and then the next thing you know, he's crying, and then I really can't get him in the car. So what I do with him, and I don't know if this will work with your one daughter who kind of drags her feet, but I really just kind of go grab him by the, you know, loop my arm through his, come on, you know, not with force, but, or take his hand gently, come on, let's go get your socks. And he responds to that a lot better. If I keep just verbally telling him, sometimes he's like reading a book and I don't even know if he hears me. You know, I'm just not sure. It's just, sometimes as moms, we are always directing things. And I think sometimes our kids start tuning us out a little bit. I don't know, that's kind of been my experience. But if I take his hand gently or put my arm around him, he's very affectionate. He loves physical touch. And so if I just give him a little nudge and touch him, come on. And I call my kids kittens. Come on, little kitten, let's go get in the car. And then he responds, and there's no argument. There's no, I don't know, something to think of.
Yeah. I know, like, for the last 2 nights or the last 2 days, I've actually gone into my oldest, and we have our little snuggle time in the morning to where she ends up leaning against me and I end up rubbing her back, and that's how I'm trying to encourage, instead of always having to be zoom and on the go, just having that bonding to where it's like, okay, like this, let's get this day started. But
yep,
I've been trying to slow down to where if we wake up a little earlier, then we'll have time to.
I love it.
That's nice.
Yep.
I was actually talking about that the other day because my father used to do that on the weekends with us. And I don't think you could do it now. I mean, it's like frowned upon for a father to get into bed with their kids, you know.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
Oh my God, I have the best memories. I mean, my heart just swells when I think about cuddling with my father. Because he wasn't, you know, an extremely emotional person. He wasn't extremely, you know, cuddly. And he was, you know, getting up, going to work every morning during the week. So on the weekends, he had some extra time. And he kind of took turns with, there was 4 of us, and he would come in and it was like you thought you won the lottery when he was in the kitchen. You know, I mean, this was the day, your day. So, but you know,
I love
it's sad
that.
because I don't think, you know, men really, a lot of
They're
men
scared,
really
I think, a
about
little
it
bit
like that.
because, yeah.
Especially a father with a daughter. Well, I guess father with a son would be bad too, but you know, he did it with everybody. And it just,
Our culture has, and sadly, that physical touch.
was very important.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it really meant a lot.
Even like, so I was a school teacher before this, and I think sometimes, how it's a shame, I just think hugs sometimes with the right child at the right place would just mean a lot, but now you can't.
Yeah.
Nope, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because it just is, we're told not to.
All kinds of things.
And yeah, unfortunately, that's just the world that we live in today. So, all right, let's talk about the last one, restoring. Did anyone, and actually the exercises that were due for today, first you're supposed to write your metabolic history, and then you were supposed to rewrite it, interpreting your story so that all of the seeming setbacks, hardships, illnesses, weight issues, diet challenges, and uncertainties are seen as the perfect journey you needed to take to learn the lessons most important for your soul's growth. Did anybody do those? A giggle from
Not bad.
Aletha says probably not.
No, I actually didn't even remember about that part, so, well, selectively didn't remember, I guess. I don't know, right? I can't, I don't do it. She actively resists writing.
Yes.
Okay, so for someone who doesn't like to write, how else could you do this activity if you don't like to write?
Well, I can think about it.
Or you could talk to your cats. You said you have 3 cats.
Oh, yes, I do.
I would encourage you then to reconsider doing this, but telling your cats.
Okay.
So you say your story. So the purpose of this is when we can, if we're always telling our story as this happened to me, that happened to me, this was bad. If you internalize that, it's hard to move past and make your life a positive. If it holds you back, I think, if you're holding on to.
I try to let it go. I try to let it go. Sometimes it's still there.
But if you can learn to retell your story, like where if you met someone for the first time and you're sharing about your past, and you can almost put a spin on it as, when I was going through this, it was horrible, but now I am stronger. I am more spiritual. It made me a better mother. Any positive spin that you can put on it would be beneficial for you than always bringing up the bad things. Like my grandmother, she died when she was like 91, but she never learned how to retell her story from a positive thing. Her whole life, she was always saying all the bad things that happened and all the people who did her wrong and all these terrible things. And she was a very unhappy person till the time she died. She just never really learned to forgive or see any positive thing from anything that ever happened in her past. And my heart goes out to her because she died being very resentful and very angry.
What did she die of?
I am surprised. I'm not really sure. She was diabetic and she had Alzheimer's, but she was like 91. So she was taking lots of medications. I'm not really sure if there was one specific thing that she died of. But she hung on so much longer than she wanted to, and than any of us wanted to, because we could see the pain and the suffering, and she was never able to be happy. And she was in a nursing home for like the last 15 years, but she was so doggone ornery and angry. She just held on and held on. And my mother tells stories where she would get mad at the people that were helping her in the nursing home, and she'd stick her tongue out at them and flip them off. And she was an ornery. She would cuss, but I'm just like, wow, she never ever was able to resolve. She hung on to every person who did her wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And
Lots of people did.
yeah.
I'm reading a fantastic book. It's Desmond Tutu and his daughter wrote it. It's called The Book of Forgiving.
Wow.
It's so good and has all these exercises in it. And he was in charge of the reconciliation of South Africa. What's it called? The Book of Forgiving. It's so good.
And
He's
who's
amazing.
this author?
Desmond Tutu. So he's the Archbishop from South Africa that was in charge of the what's the first word? Truth and Reconciliation after apartheid. And I went to a peace conference in 2004, and he was there, and so I got to meet him. And he was amazing. And the book is just fantastic because it talks about the concept of forgiving, which is really hard for us, and how it's not. You're not saying it's okay. You're just saying you're going to stop letting them victimize you.
Right,
You know, the more angry, the longer you hold the anger, the longer those people are victimizing you.
right.
And then it's got exercise after exercise, rather than just talking about it. Like, okay, you know, sit down and do this. And it's got meditations, it's got poems, and it's just so good.
And obviously, some of us have, we have had things happen to us that are definitely, in my opinion, a lot deeper than others of us, right? So, I mean, I think about a program that I saw once on television about this one mother who lost her 2 twin girls to a drunk driver. And so I'm not going to even try to put myself in her shoes and think that I would know how and when to resolve that pain. But I do know that the forgiveness process is what will elevate her so that she can move on with her life and share whatever love she has with the world. I don't want her to die like my grandmother did, of holding on to all that hate and anger. It just doesn't serve anybody, and especially her. So yeah, I'm not trying to, I'm, you know, some of us have deeper things to forgive than others, but I do know that whatever the situation is, if you can, you're better off. Your children, your spouse, your friends, those around you are going to be better off if you know, but sometimes, you know, it takes time. What does, in the book, what does he say about the timeliness of all that?
And it's very individual, you know. And he's coming at this. So the Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa was about people who had committed atrocities coming and admitting to it. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about them speaking their truth, and in a lot of instances, talking with the person who they actually victimized. It was about healing. It wasn't about retribution. And so he's seen incredible stories of things that have happened to people and been done to people, you know, torture and all that sort of stuff. So he has a very broad base of knowledge of what's possible as far as forgiving goes. People can forgive anything. So it's so good.
Yeah, well, I put the name of the book down, and the author, I'll have to look that up. So yeah, if this speaks to you, that you need to go back into your past and be able to retell your story in a way that it was the perfect journey for your soul's growth, is how he likes to state it. If there's a way that, you know, that speaks to you, and it may take some time, but that is definitely going to help you on your path to healing. Because as we hang on to anger, fear, resentment, that could possibly be the reason that we have the excess weight. Does that make sense?
Well, have you ever heard of the book, It's Not What You're Eating, It's What's Eating You?
What's that about?
About all the inner, you know, the things that are up, you're having problems with internal, you know, emotionally. And that can cause you to do a lot of eating. It's a good book. It's just, you know,
Because food is often what we turn to for comfort.
right.
So in our hours of depression, grief, fear, like such shame, guilt, often for comfort, that's what
That's
we
kind of
turn
what
to for food. So sometimes
that kind of stuff.
we need to remedy these feelings that we've got bottled up inside us before we can, you know, get to our healthy weight. All right. The metabolic power of the sacred. Turn the page. I could probably sit here and visit with you ladies for 4 hours today. Okay.
I got cupcakes to carry.
Oh goodness, we got to get Elise out of here. She's got cupcakes. Chapter 8, the metabolic power of the sacred. First bullet point says, if you think your nutritional concerns can be rightfully addressed with food alone, this is what we were just talking about, think again. When the real life requirements of the sacred are not being met. And here's 8 characteristics that he calls these requirements of the sacred: love, truth, courage, commitment, compassion, forgiveness, faith, and surrender. When those are not being met, the body weakens in some way. And this may be inviting disease, calling forth whatever symptoms are necessary to alert us to the soul lesson that is calling our attention. Has there ever been a time that you got sick in your life or got an illness in your life that you feel that these symptoms were actually alerting you that something is off in your life?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. Was there a time that you put on weight in a short amount of time period that life was trying to give you an alert that something is out of balance or wrong? And so you started eating, but it may not have been that it may not have been about the food. It was that something in your life was out of balance. Can you think of anything there? For example, one that comes up for me is when I was anorexic and I started working at the cafe and I started like eating and eating and eating. That was a signal, I guess, from the universe that I was starving. I was very, very hungry. And that what I was doing is not healthy or safe, and it's not going to work anymore. And so I guess maybe that was, even though I was mad, I gained about 50 pounds in about 6 months. But I guess that was my message from the universe, that the way I was doing things, I was out of balance. I was not happy. I was starving myself. I didn't have much energy. I wasn't able to focus very good because, you know, you need food for energy for your mind to be able to work properly. So I guess that message from the universe was telling me, stop this nonsense. You're not going down a good path. I guess that's one thing that I can think of.
I just have always,
Because of any messages you got as a child?
I don't know, well, it could be part, I don't want to blame my childhood, but, you know, we were always told to eat everything that I mean, I think this is a cultural thing. You have to eat what you eat based on what's on your plate, not whether you're hungry or not. You know, we talked about that before. Don't waste that food, you know, and,
Did you have a happy childhood?
very, very happy. I can't complain one bit. My parents were, you know, they were good parents, and I had a very idyllic, actually, childhood. I lived in this little house out in the country, and there was a stream, and we could swim and play, and I had a great time.
So it's possible that you just never really were taught how to eat as a child. And there's no one to blame. And maybe you were just never really taught. Like I wasn't. I was overweight as a child. I didn't do anything wrong. I had a happy childhood. It's just that there was this abundance of food all the time, and it was very unhealthy. And I didn't know that there were boundaries, or I didn't know how to balance.
I think I ate fairly healthy. We never ate fast food, or my mom cooked dinner every night. And it was, her major in college was home economics at Cornell University.
That's funny.
She knew all the, you know, nutritional rules at the time. She had vegetables and, you know, the whole thing. But, you know, there was abundance of food, and she would serve dinner and we would eat, you know.
So maybe it was your
Everything
mother's
right.
love for food, since she really knew how to cook and always thought that by loving her children, she would serve this abundance of food.
Oh, yeah,
That food meant love,
right.
and
Oh, yeah.
it just got a little bit out of, you know, the portions got a little bit out of control, and you just never were educated, and
Right.
there's really no one to blame, or.
I mean, and she had a cookie jar in the kitchen where when we came home from school, we would raid that and eat, you know, whatever we wanted, and there was never any limits. So, you know, and of course, you know, those are good, cookies are good. There's nothing wrong with cookies, to kids anyway.
So yeah, just, maybe just having
So we were always, all of us were kind of a little bit chubby when we were kids, and then it just kind of went on from
and because your mother loved to cook and that's how she nourished her children,
there.
she didn't see a problem with, you could eat whatever you want. That made her happy when you were,
Right.
do you know women who get a lot of joy out of seeing people consume that means that they're a good cook, right? Do
Right.
you see that sometimes, that you want them to eat a lot because then that means I did a good job and I'm a good cook? Sometimes women, we will internalize that message, right? So I guess now you can just say I'm older and I realize now that I feel better when there are some boundaries in place and it's okay. I love you, Mom, and this was the journey that I was on, and
Well, yeah, and I've done that for years, just, I've not, felt obliged to eat whatever's in front of me, but, so,
now we know where she gets her cooking skills from.
not compared to my mother, believe me.
She had an Ivy League cooking degree.
I know, she did. She did. I used to tell her it was a good place to find a husband degree. That's what she meant, my father,
Right, yeah.
who was in law school. So,
Okay, next bullet point. Did anyone read and remember the story about Phil who put on 40 pounds suddenly? And the reason he put on his weight is that his son was sent to prison for 5 years without parole for selling marijuana. And this was very unexpected. He was a good boy. And so it was like a shock to the family. And so he put on 40 pounds because he just couldn't handle the thought of his son going to prison. He was a nice boy, and how was he going to survive in prison? And he was very nervous about that. And this talks about now how he reached out to the divine, whatever that meant to him. It doesn't really go into specific as to what religion that was or how that looked. But once he believed in something more, he could trust that his son was guided and protected. So he let go of, I think that he maybe gained the 40 pounds because he was living in such fear as to what was going to happen to his son. But again, being that his reasoning, why did this happen? It caused him to reach out to a higher power to find, I guess, peace, and that he could trust that his son was going to be okay. And then it said in the book that his extra 40 pounds was the fuel that he needed for a new relationship to the divine and a new journey with his son. So again, if you can always see like the message behind, what's the message behind this extra weight? What's the message behind this fatigue? What's the message behind this fear, this anxiety? What am I supposed to learn from this? Where is it guiding me? Is there a deeper message in this? And maybe if you listen to that, it'll help you evolve and elevate to this place you're supposed to be. Does that make sense? Which is not easy to do either, is it? But what is life trying to tell me? Where do I need to go from here? Where am I lacking? Where do I go with this? Because it says here, next bullet point, whatever you believe is the disease is actually the cure. A lot of us see as our weight as this disease or this illness or this really bad thing, right? So what if we looked at it as this is the cure? This is what happened so that there's something else that was out of balance before the weight, and the weight is just the symbol of now what was out of balance. It says, whatever bodily concern you believe is the problem, in the soul's reality, the solution. I hope I copied that right. I was trying to take it word for word in the book. Does that make sense? Whatever bodily concern you believe is the problem, is in the soul's reality, the solution. It says, to the ancient Greeks, every symptom was seen as a visitation from the gods, a holy messenger, to alert the soul that it needs a course correction. For example, are you experiencing low energy? Typically, the message is you need to slow down. Do you have excess weight? What's the message there? Is your life out of balance? And then it says, let's look at our relationship to the earth, to each other, to ourselves. And then one other thing he talked about in the book there was people eating mass-produced food and moving at a speed at which it's difficult to see the results of our actions is a collective experiment gone wrong. So these are just some things that could be why excess weight is in your life right now. So is your life out of balance in some way? Is there something about your relationship with yourself that's out of balance? What about your relationship with another person? Maybe a spouse, a child. Interesting, isn't it? Because these are things that cause us to eat. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
These are things that cause us to eat because we're reaching for food, for comfort. It's a survival mechanism. And that's how we are, you know, we're reaching for comfort. So maybe if we can find out what's out of balance with a relationship, and it could be the relationship with ourselves. Are we too hard on ourselves? Are we a perfectionist? You're smiling.
I always was.
So can we, do you know, he says perfectionism is a virus that will consume us and hurt us.
I'm better than I was.
What?
I'm better than I was.
Hey,
So
improvement is good.
it's letting go, however we can, to that idea of perfectionism, because it will consume us and cause us stress, you know, and then when we're stressed, we eat, those kind of things. And here was another thing that he talks about. For some of us, it's not a personal issue. It is a personal issue, but it's also a collective issue. What he means by that is you're not the only person that's overweight. You're not the only person that's overweight. If we look at our culture as a whole, it is a collective problem. It is not just your problem or your problem. It is a collective problem. We are doing something wrong because being overweight, obesity, it's on the rise. So sometimes we have to take a look at not what am I doing wrong and putting all the emphasis on myself and all the blame on myself. We can also look as a world, as a culture, what are we collectively doing wrong? What are the messages that are being sent that are not working? What are the theories out there that we're telling people that are not working? Can you think of things that come to mind? Aletha,
Mostly everything we're doing is wrong, it seems like.
give us a couple of things that are coming up for you.
So we worship appearance above everything else, and we worship perfectionism. That's something that we're supposed to be proud of. Everybody tries to act like, oh, I'm perfection, but you're really proud of it, aren't you?
No, it's just there. It's like nothing.
That virus, isn't
It's
it?
just
That you can't
always
shake
there
it.
when I was a
Yeah.
kid, you know.
It's very sanctioned. So there's a lot of there is no respect paid to like, oh, so go talk to somebody, go work it out. Therapy is frowned upon. It's getting a little bit better, but yeah, we aren't encouraged to go work through the stuff. We all have all kinds of traumatic craziness that went on through our lives and that we're not equipped to really work through, and we're not encouraged to go and get help with it. We're just supposed to, pull up our bootstraps and be fine with it, It's a mess. Sending people to war and we expect them to come back totally fine. How the hell is that going to happen? I mean, it's insane. It's totally crazy. So, yeah, lots of stuff.
Yeah. And I think where there's just an awful lot of, a lack of, our culture is not moving as much as it used to. We just don't get exercise in our daily lives like we used to. And we eat a lot more and a lot of things that, are devoid of nutritional value. We eat more than we eat more calories than we burn.
Because we got to hurry because we got to work a lot. And
Right.
So do you see that it's a collective issue?
Yeah.
So I want you for just a moment to kind of take the blame off yourself for how, I mean, it is also a cultural issue. We put so much emphasis on appearance that we've tried so hard to keep our appearance so good, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and that's caused us to go on these terrible diets